What's up, everybody, and Happy New Year! Wahoo! 2024. What a year! And damn, am I ready to get right into the new year. I got a lot of stuff planned, a lot of big stuff in the works, but first of all, let me just apologize for taking such a long break. My last video was posted on Christmas Day. It is now, at time of recording this, the 9th of January. That is basically 2 weeks. I think the longest break I took before was 5 days. So yeah, I'm sorry for leaving you guys in the dark. I've already got a lot of stuff in the works. I've got a lot planned, some stuff I've already done. Just because I wasn't posting didn't mean that I wasn't working. While it may have seemed that I was, chillaxing, relaxing, having a nice holiday, well, I kind of was, but I was also working. I wanted to get a bunch of stuff in check, set the groundwork, prep for the new year. I've got a lot of really cool videos coming up that I want to work on, and to do that, I kind of needed some space, some time, space and time. I needed a TARDIS. No, but jokes aside, I needed to lay the groundwork for some of the biggest stuff that I want to do further down the line. And I've also got lots planned for this month, January, and beyond. And hopefully this video will be a little bit longer than the last one. I kind of want to ease my shoes back into this YouTube stuff, you know what I mean? Took a little break, but I'm back now. And I suppose what better place to start than with the episode itself, the church on Ruby Road, which if you watch my initial video, which a lot of you did, thank you very much for that, I left feeling a little bit confused. I didn't really have my full rankings etched out. I didn't really know what I thought of it. I knew I enjoyed the episode, I knew I liked it, but I didn't really know where I would rank it. So I of course spent the next couple of days watching the commentary, watching that Russell T Davies documentary Imagine, doing a bunch of stuff to see if I can finally form a full opinion. Of course, that video was just my first impressions, my initial reaction, and here is the full review in quotation marks. I'm not going to be super critical and I'm not going to go super in depth right now. It's going to happen throughout the video. I will be bringing up more and more points as we go on. But I think because I did not give that rating at the end of the previous video, I do have an obligation to give it here. And I think overall, I like the episode. I think it's fun. For me, you've really got to compare it to a lot of the other Christmas specials, a lot of the other specials that we get in general. And most of them, to be frank, are shit.
And I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Dr. Widow and the Wardrobe, Husbands of River Song, Return of Dr. Mysterio. These are all ass, right? And if you compare it to those episodes, this is like S tier. But if you compare it to other episodes around it, it's pretty standard. I don't think I would call it the best Christmas special, but looking at the competition, it might be in the top 5. Hell, it might even be in the top 3. I'm thinking my official rating for this episode, at least as of now, is around 6-7 out of 10. I have my problems, as you can imagine. I kind of went over them in the last video, but there are also the pros. The number one, of course, being the new Doctor and new companion. Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson are great. They're amazing. It feels great to finally have new faces on Doctor Who, and these guys are really fun. As I said in my video, they're not like God's gift when it comes to companions. Yes, there have been better ones in the past, but that does not mean that they are bad. That does not mean that I can't not like them, if you know what I mean. In my opinion, Doctor Who is not a zero-sum game when it comes to quality. Just because something was better doesn't mean that this can't still be good. I see a lot of people saying this stuff. Like, for example, I think the main one I see is when people talk about Series 6 of Doctor Who, they're like, oh, well, it's not as good as Series 5. It's like, yeah, it's not as good as Series 5. It's still good though. And that's exactly how I feel about this Doctor companion pairing. In that, in this episode especially, they were very fun. Ncuti Gatwa as well was a lot better in this than he was in The Giggle. He had a couple funny lines in The Giggle, but in that episode he was so sidelined, he didn't even really feel like the Doctor yet. Here, when he's in the coat, he's got the sonic screwdriver. Trust me, we'll talk about that. He's prancing around, he's doing the jumps across the roof, all of that great stuff. I think for me, that's one of my favorite parts as well. The fast-paced action. That scene running across the rooftops, the energy in that scene, they jump across the gap onto the ladder. He shows the gravity gloves, the Mavity gloves, talk about that as well. And they have that bit where they're both walking in the air, flying or gliding, I suppose. And I think that is why I enjoy the episode. The atmosphere, of it all overall. The Goblin ship as well is a really fun set piece. And speaking of which, that final act where they do go back in time, that whole scene is so visually amazing. It's a great setting for a final battle as well, personal to the characters, ties into the start of the episode again. Big thumbs up from me on that ending. Throughout the program there are a lot of really funny lines. I think the standout for me, the best comedy moment of the whole episode is when Ruby tells the doctor the baby's name is Lulubelle and he's like, oh, such a good name. That is so funny, and it really gives us an insight into what this doctor is like. Speaking of which, the character work throughout the whole episode is really good. Ruby's mom and the grandma, they're both really funny. The doctor himself, of course, he had that little bit of mystery in the first act, and then throughout we get a bit more, and then towards the ending we hear him talk about being an orphan and all that. All good stuff from me, and we get that kind of It's a Wonderful Life, we see what happens once the baby is gone type moment, where all of the color is gone from the whole scene. The two characters are crying. It's nothing mind-blowing, and it's not the most original thing ever, but it works, and that's what matters. And something I have to give props for is the connection to the Timeless Child. Now, you guys know how I feel about the Timeless Child. I feel like I mention it every video, but safe to say I am not the biggest #1 Timeless Child fan in the whole world. But if they're gonna do it, and it seems to me that they are, this is the way how, man. They tie it in thematically to the characters and stories that they're going to tell moving forward. You have Ruby Sunday, whose story mirrors the Timeless Child. You have the Doctor going on this journey of self-discovery. It's good stuff, and it feels like a direct through line from Power of the Doctor, which I really like. But at the same time, there are problems. The first act especially is definitely the weakest. There's some stuff in it which feels a little confused. I think my big problem with the first act is the scene with the snowman head that falls down. It's really random, and it serves not really much purpose except to introduce the sonic screwdriver, which gets introduced later anyway, and it all made sense to me when I watched the commentary and Russell T Davies confessed that that scene was a late addition due to Disney interference, which we're going to be talking about in detail throughout the whole video. The scene itself isn't terrible. It's not a terrible scene. It's just a little random, and it's a weird inclusion, and it kind of takes away from the Doctor's grand entrance later in the episode, which I feel would be a much cooler way to fully introduce the character. On a positive note about that scene, I am glad that the Doctor did not put down that policeman, and the more I watch it, the more I am grateful that that's the route Russell T Davies decided to go down. And it would have been lazy, and it would have just made the whole interaction awkward and aggressive instead of what the whole episode is trying to be, which is warm and fuzzy. It's a Christmas episode. Another thing which definitely should have been included is an action scene in Act 2. That long corridor in the apartment, there should have been some goblins going back and forth. I'm just saying. My biggest problem with the episode after watching is that after they leave the goblin ship, there is a whole lot of yapping, a lot of talking from the characters, and they're basically saying nothing. They're saying stuff which we already know. And there's a lot of speaking, there's a lot of strange editing. It's kind of like in Across the Spider-Verse where Miles goes into the opposite reality, and they're doing some tricks with the editing to like fake the audience out into thinking that Miles is actually in his original universe. It's like that, except they flop the editing and it just feels disjointed. And you know what would have fixed this scene? You know what would have fixed the momentum of the whole episode? If you have the goblins come down and chase them. I honestly feel if that scene, which was originally intended to be there, was actually in the episode, it would fix all of my problems. Because right now, that little section between them coming down from the goblin ship and when the actual final fight begins, when the Doctor goes back in time, that to me is the weakest part of the episode by far. And my final point before we get onto the comments, because trust me, we will guys, don't worry, is that there are too many mystery boxes. There just are, man. I don't want to hear it. I think there are like 11 right now. 11 mystery boxes in 4 episodes. That is not okay. But anyway, that's enough from me. Well, technically I'm gonna still be talking. You know what I mean. What about you? I've got more comments here than I've ever picked up before. So sit back, relax, and let's talk some Doctor Who. And so here we are with the first comment from Thomas Clark 6717. It was good. Was it amazing? Nah, but Chuti and Millie sold it, and that's the main point. Definitely agree. Fairly average story, like with immense enthusiasm from those two and great chemistry, which makes me think that their first season is going to slap. It served its purpose and was fun on Christmas Day. Both my parents said it was great and they can't wait to watch the new season. So now I'm looking forward to it and cementing these guys in my Doctor Who mind. I think I agree on basically all of this. The only part for me where my opinion kind of differs from yours is that for me with Doctor Who casting, I've been around the block a couple times at this point. So for me, I've never really had those moments where whatever became the Doctor. You see that a lot being thrown around in YouTube comment sections, especially if you look at clips. People say, this is the moment where blank became the Doctor. And for me, the moment where someone becomes the Doctor is the moment when the casting is announced. Tomi Tudigawa has been the Doctor since around 2022, but of course that's just me. But I know that I'm the anomaly, and I definitely agree that the two main actors have great chemistry, and that the purpose of this episode was just to be some fun on Christmas Day, which I think we can all appreciate. Maybe. I don't know though. My problem with this episode is the Doctor saying, I'm alone. Like his weird clone David Tennant brother wasn't hanging out with Donna just down the road. Yeah, it's a little weird. How do I say this without going on an overly long rant about the end of the giggle? The ending of the 14th Doctor is one of the worst creative decisions in the entirety of Doctor Who. It is baffling. I don't really know how someone who has such an intelligent and developed understanding of Doctor Who would think that that ending is a good idea. I don't really understand. The simplest way I can put it is that it's detrimental to the show. The 14th Doctor in general is just a massive misstep. I do enjoy, in a vacuum, David Tennant's performance as the 14th Doctor. I do enjoy, individually, each of the 3 anniversary specials. I don't like the overarching story. I don't like the precedent it sets. I don't like the way it ended. I don't like the way it started. And I just have no idea what the hell they were thinking with that scene where he's eating dinner. That is, in my opinion, one of the worst scenes in the history of Doctor Who. Now, if you guys watched my video on the giggle, I rated that episode rather highly because genuinely outside of that kind of weird nebulous ending, I did enjoy the episode. And I don't actually take points off the episode for that ending, which may sound a bit weird, but hear me out, just let me finish. I take away points from the era as a whole. That's what I judge when I consider that ending, because it is such a misstep in terms of world building that it is just inignorable. If you could literally forget the ending of the last episode before the next one started just because there was a 2-week gap between airing, lucky you. But it is not an out there overly critical nitpick to be like, where is the 14th Doctor in this situation? We last saw him half a mile away from the events of where this episode are taking place. He could hop on the bus that we see at the start of this episode and be here in 15 minutes. That is not a nitpick. That is just a problem with the era. Having 2 Doctors with 2 TARDISes, by the way. Why the hell does he have another TARDIS? But there are 2 Doctors. There should be no problem going forward ever. Why aren't they just teamed up 24/7? If the 14th Doctor didn't have a TARDIS and was forced to stay in one place, sure, maybe I can understand it. But no, they do this ass pull where they clone the TARDIS somehow, and apparently the 14th Doctor is still going off on adventures of his own. Why is he not helping? As soon as I finished the episode, the only way I could headcanon the whole bi-generation thing into making sense is if it's a closed loop. If it is that the 14th Doctor eventually does become the 15th Doctor, if that's how it works. But then you look at the fact that there are 2 TARDISes and the TARDIS is cloned, and then that all comes crumbling down. And then you've got, you know, those smart asses who are like, oh, he becomes the curator. I don't want him to become the curator. That's dumb as hell. As an idea, the curator is already walking on thin ice. Thin ice. But because it's a fan servicey fun scene at the end of the 50th anniversary, I think we can all overlook it. That is not the case with how the 60th ends. To me, that whole sequence feels like a nightmare. The Doctor as a character is crafted to not be suited to those environments, to those domestic environments. I've personally been to those dinners or lunches or whatever they are myself in real life, I don't like them. When Rose, a character who I don't care for, started complaining about the vegan what's-its-face, did I find that endearing? Did I find that fun? Did it make me think this is a good environment that the Doctor would want to be in? No. If anything, it made me think the opposite. That moment should signify to the Doctor that he's made a terrible, terrible mistake. See, you can hate on the big man Chris Chibnall himself, but at least he understood this. Power of Three is a flawed episode, mostly because of the third act that completely fell apart due to one actor's incompetence. But the first act especially is pretty damn solid, and that scene where the Doctor gets bored and does all of those chores and whatever and then is like, I give up, I'm going on adventures. To me, I feel like that is so quintessential to the character, and it shows a real level of understanding that the ending of The Giggle frankly lacks. The whole scene itself feels uncomfortable. I feel a real sense of dread. And then you have the weird excuse as to why Wilf isn't there by saying, oh, he's shooting the moles, but the moles have force fields because I love the moles. You love the moles? I love the moles. What the fuck is going on? This is another case of just confused writing where Russell T Davies can't tell whether or not he wants to be traditional or not. He wants to have his cake and eat it too. He likes the idea of someone shooting moles, but he doesn't like the idea of someone shooting moles and like killing them. So he has a force field around the moles to make sure they're okay, as if that doesn't take away the whole point of shooting moles in the first place. This isn't like fishing, where you have those certain fishermen who will release the fish back into the pond, river, lake, whatever type of body of water. It's a totally different thing, and it's just random and unfunny, and it's a weird inclusion. Apparently there was another scene that was cut here where the 14th Doctor would give a speech, a mournful speech in memory of Bernard Cribbins. For some reason they cut it out because it would be too much of a bummer. Well, yeah, an icon of television died. It is a bit of a bummer. The least you could do is pay respect to it with a scene in the episode. To me, that is just yet another miss piled on top of the misses of this one scene. And I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about it even more in the future. Let's get on to the next comment. Antonio Plus says, he's not with them. By generation was like a fork in the road. New face, new life. 14 stepped away from the responsibility so that he could live. While 15 is like this new guy free of most of the trauma. Notice how I didn't say all. The only outstanding thing being all timeless child stuff. That's the lasting trauma / mystery he has to carry. 10 has to process all the stuff from the memory wipe onwards, and 15 has to explore pre-memory wipe. Now I understand this because this is the new explanation going forward. It wasn't the explanation given 2 weeks ago after The Giggle ended, but now that this episode has come out, this is the new explanation until another new explanation comes out on why by generation was necessary or needed or wanted or anything. I think the most telling thing about this comment is the free of most of the trauma. Whether or not the by generation happens or not, we're still going to be exploring some of the trauma afterwards, which means that all of this is completely pointless and doesn't need to happen. Why does the 14th Doctor have to process stuff from the memory wipe and then 15 is pre-memory wipe? Isn't that completely arbitrary? It's almost like it would make more sense if it didn't happen whatsoever. You know what I mean? I'm just saying though. But I think that he's not with them is the only explanation that we're gonna get as to why the 14th Doctor doesn't show up. He's just not there. You're not meant to think about it, right? It's just meant to be, this happened, don't think about it, don't think about it, don't think about it, move on to new stuff. But for me, I guess the more that someone tells me not to think about something, the more I'm gonna want to think about it. It's a problem with the world building of the era. That's what I said before, and I'm gonna say it again. If you introduce this new Doctor Who universe, and one of the first things you do is introduce the fact that there are 2 Doctors now, instinctively, the audience is just gonna be wondering, hey, where's that other Doctor? Because why wouldn't they? You've given them no reason not to think that. There is no logical real explanation. The only explanation is he's not with them. But on a plus side, let's talk about something interesting in this comic, because I think this guy has spotted something or pointed out something which I too have pointed out and think is going to be a big thing moving forward, which is the Timeless Child stuff that is the lasting mystery. And let me know what you guys think about this one in the comment section below, because I'm about to say something which may seem a little controversial, but to me it makes perfect sense, which is that going into this new era of Doctor Who, the Timeless Child is the new Time War. And what I mean by that is that in the reboot 2005, in the gap between season 26 and series 1, a lot had changed. The character of the Doctor had been completely morphed, updated, transformed by this traumatic event, which was the Time War, which was a complete mystery in 2005. No one had any idea what was going on, what had happened, etc., and it was a defining feature, a defining characteristic of the revival of Doctor Who. So much so that it's even getting referenced all these years later. But what the bi-generation is trying to do is basically put that to bed. And instead, we strive forward, we go forward with a new version of the Time War, which is the Timeless Child, which, similarly to the Time War, introduces an element of mystery that we, the audience, have no information about. It also changes what we know about the character of the Doctor. Pre-2005, it would have been unimaginable that the Doctor would have committed genocide against his own people. It would have been unimaginable that the Doctor would have become a soldier. I find it funny when you look at circles discussing modern Who don't really have that knowledge of classic Who as much, especially when talking about the character of the Doctor, because a lot of people seem to think that the Doctor isn't a morally good character, or is a morally ambiguous character, or that he's not a hero. Well, for the vast majority of the show's history, the Doctor was a hero. He was unambiguously a hero. If you go back to season 17, Tom Baker, you can't watch those episodes and tell me that he isn't a hero. With the 5th Doctor and the Master, you have the Master calling him out for his excessive do-goodery, or whatever the line was. The Doctor is good. He's a good hero. And then off screen, he committed such a heinous act that it transformed him into someone who is morally ambiguous, as he is in the new show. But that is a big switch up. Do you see what I mean? There is a reason why when you go back to the 2013 Doctor Who behind the scenes stuff to do with Day of the Doctor, there's a real focus on the Doctor being the one to push the button. There's the line Clara says, which is, "I knew it was you, but I didn't imagine you pressing the button," which is more or less what Stephen Moffat thought about it himself. He thought, I could never imagine that the Doctor would destroy Gallifrey. I could never imagine that.
The thing that always fascinated me with the Time War is he commits genocide off screen. Off screen, he goes and he burns up all the Time Lords. And you think, well, okay, that's fine. He's burning out all those evil High Council Time Lords. Remember, and there's kids on Gallifrey too. There's innocent people.
Which is part of the reason why he undid it, because in his mind it was such a far stray away from the character of the Doctor, which is a whole different argument for a whole nother day. But what I'm basically trying to say is that the Timeless Child is the modern equivalent of that. The problem is that the Timeless Child is boring. Now, I think a lot of people would expect me to be a Time War hater, because as I've just spent the last 5 or so minutes explaining, it does drastically alter the character of the Doctor and the perception of the character that the audience has for him. But no, I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's compelling. I think it's emotional. And I think it is one of the leading factors in why the revival was so successful, because people love that story. They emotionally connect to it. I do too. I think it's badass. And it's a great development that's shrouded in an appropriate level of mystery. My problems with the Time War kind of come in with the expanded universe. All of the Big Finish Time War stuff has been kind of ass. And what was shown of it in Day of the Doctor was, to be fair, I love Day of the Doctor, but to be fair, the Time War stuff was a little boring. The concept of the Time War can never be fully realized visually, sadly. And that's just the way it is. But that's part of the reason why it's so cool. The Timeless Child, as someone who has defended it in the past, and I will still go on to, the Timeless Child is boring. There isn't that same interest in the early parts of the Doctor's timeline that people want to pretend there is. Most people are completely fine with the origin given, which was that he was a regular Time Lord and then he left. There really isn't that much interest in the fandom to explore that part of the timeline. that much. And so when you take that away and you say, well, let's replace it with a different mystery, you're running the risk that this new mystery that you're setting up is more compelling and satisfying than the original mystery that was there to begin with. And this was one of the big problems with the VNAs as well, and a lot of the stuff in the late 7th Doctor's era that thankfully wasn't fully realized. I say thankfully, but if the season 27 had come out, I would still love it. And I suppose there can be interesting stuff to do character-wise with the Timeless Child. And I think you've already seen a lot of people switching up on it, saying, oh, I really like it now because of the character stuff in the Russell T Davies era, which is pretty much exactly the same as what it was in the Chibnall era. There isn't really like a much more in-depth exploration of it in these newer episodes, Wild Blue Yonder and Church of Ruby Road, than there was in, say, Flux. The 15th Doctor says, I'm adopted, and that's pretty much it. I do still definitely like it though. It feels very rewarding as a fan who sat through the development of this plotline, which, to be fair, I wasn't the biggest fan of. I do actually quite enjoy the Chibnall era. I've said this quite a number of times, but that plot point specifically is not my cup of tea. So to see my willingness to sit through, be rewarded with payoff and character moments, etc., is great to see. Which kind of leads me back to what I was saying before about this being an amazing episode to directly follow on from Power of the Doctor. There's a real through line, thematically and story-wise, from the Chibnall era series 13 to this episode, which would be much more effective if we didn't just have those 3 specials. This episode right after Power of the Doctor works really well, like character-wise, story-wise, everything-wise. It works really well, it's really cool. It would be a great follow-up. But instead, we get the ending to the giggle, which totally ruins it. But anyway, on to the next comment from Sinom says, I think and hope the reason for Ruby going into the TARDIS will probably be brought up at the beginning of the next episode. Like, she obviously wanted to follow him as soon as she realized he's a time traveler, so maybe she wants to ask him to help her find her relatives or something similar. That seems to be her driving force this season. Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. If you watched my last video, I talked about how her motivation will very likely be similar to Rose's, which is that she wants to go back in time to find out / save / talk to her parents. The plot twist that the woman who's most likely carrying Ruby to the church will be Ruby herself has been predicted by literally everyone. I don't think it's an original observation at this point to throw that one out there. But I imagine the resolution to this whole plot line will be words to the effect of, you have your family, you don't need to care about who your blood relatives are, blah blah blah. Stuff we've already seen a million times before. Musa Hope says, that really is your personal gripe. I do not feel any 14 looming, and it's silly to say Doctor can't feel any emotion about the Timeless Child thing even after rehab with Donna. Why is it silly to say that? You set up that he's going to get over all his trauma, and then we see right in the next episode that he didn't get over his trauma. Do you know how you fix that? You just cut out the bit where he says he got over all his trauma. Just cut that bit clean out, remove it, and then everything else works perfectly. I suppose it is a personal thing, you know? If it isn't affecting other people, I'm glad. I'm glad that other people can overlook that, forget about the 14th Doctor entirely. Trust me, I wish I could forget about the 14th Doctor entirely. In my ideal world, he would not exist. Now, of course, I know, because I've been saying this the whole time, the reason the 14th Doctor does exist is because Chutagawa wasn't available to film. He was filming Barbie or Sex Education or whatever the hell it was. And so the story has been told countless times. Russell T Davies, he contacted David Tennant during the lockdown rewatches and were like, damn, this is really cool. Might we maybe want to do this again? Then Catherine Tate was like, yeah, I want to do it again. And so they got the whole band back together to do it again. And that's why we got the 14th Doctor instead of the 15th Doctor being the 14th Doctor. You know what I mean? And I hate to be this guy. I hate to say it, but we're all thinking it. If the guy who you want to hire to be the next Doctor isn't available, you gotta hire someone else. In the words of Rachel Ziegler, that's show business, baby. The reasoning doesn't really make sense to me because there must be hundreds, if not thousands, of actors, both young and old, across all demographics, who would want to get a shot at being the next Doctor, right? And you're telling me that this guy was so good that even though he wasn't available for a whole year, he still got the job? Damn, he must be pretty damn good then. Basically, the 14th Doctor was a terrible creative decision, and it's aged like milk. By the way, of course, guys, I'm joking. I really like Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor, and I'm glad that he was cast. I think it's an amazing casting. Here's one from Eric is Waiting. My goat. I honestly thought it was just a good episode of Doctor Who. The singing kind of threw me off, but I really did like this episode. I didn't think it was absolutely amazing, but it was definitely good. Also, the trailer for season 1 looks really good. Thank you for bringing that up, my friend, because I really wanted a good segue to talk about it. But before that, let's just mention the singing. I thought it was okay. I thought it was funny. I don't really have any strong opinions either way. I think the only thing where I was slightly bothered was Ruby Sunday singing along too, because with the Doctor I can accept it because he's an eccentric guy, and also, you know, it's this version of the Doctor. I can imagine him doing stuff like that. With Ruby Sunday, she's totally thrown into a new environment, new element or whatever. But of course, that's just a nitpick. And the more I watch the episode, of course, the less I care about that. Not that I really cared about it before, it was just a little thing. It's also fun, which makes it way easier to excuse. But anyway, the new trailer, season 1. Well, I suppose it isn't a new trailer anymore, but still. Is that guy the monk? I don't know, probably not. I just really get the vibes. Apparently, he's a celebrity guest casting as well. Never heard of him. A lot of the stuff shown in the trailer was stuff we'd already seen. It was still really awesome to see it all in motion. Ncuti Gatwa looks amazing in it. Millie Gibson looks great too. It's probably one of the best series trailers we've got in a while. Just editing wise, the music is really cool. I'm really looking forward to that Beatles episode, I must confess. Speaking of which, we were just talking about the singing. I have a little concern. Do you think that they're gonna overdo the singing stuff? We know that there's gonna be music in that Beatles episode. We know that there's the whole musical episode, which is probably gonna have Jinx Monsoon in it as well. We had the musical score in this episode, and of course, last episode we also had the musical number. There was also one in Power of the Doctor as well just before that. Are we gonna get burnt out on these? The more you do it, the less impact it has. The reason why the scene in The Giggle works so well, and the reason why the scene in this episode also works, depending on who you ask, is the fact that it's unique, right? It's the fact that you don't see this every episode. The Toymaker is such a crazy villain. They can have a whole dance number while singing along to Spice Girls, and it would make sense because he's that crazy and that powerful. With the Goblin song, it's meant to be funny in that it's so outrageous and the lyrics are so preposterous, and you don't see this every week. You don't see dancing goblins, singing goblins every week talk about eating kids. But if we did start to see it every week, if there were songs in every episode, it would get tiring really fast. Series 11 has a kind of similar problem, which is that I think 3 times they used music in a strange way, so much so that it lost its effect. Rosa was the first one where I think it depends on who you ask how you feel about the ending to Rosa with the music. I personally thought it worked really well when I first watched it. The more I go back and see it, the more I think it's a little bit corny. I think the episode is good overall though. Arachnids in the UK has the infamous Stormzy scene, which in my opinion is one of the worst moments of Doctor Who ever. That was one where I remember watching it for the first time and I wanted to leave the room. I didn't, but instead I shrank into my chair. And then the third example is in Demons of the Punjab, which in my opinion works really well and is a really great way to end the episode. I think it's a really emotional way to end it with that music. But because there had already been the instances earlier in the season of that music, on first watch, it took away from it. And it's only on subsequent rewatches where I can watch Demons of the Punjab and be like, damn, this is actually really good. And I don't want that to happen in the modern series. I don't want to get to this Beatles episode, which I'm pretty sure is episode 4, but I don't want to get there and be like, well, we've already had 5 musical numbers in the past 5 episodes. We're feeling a little burnt out now. What's setting this one apart? So hopefully Russell T Davies will not spam the musical numbers at us anymore. Overall, I am very excited for the next season. Probably a little bit more than I was for the specials, to be honest. Although I must confess there is a small bit of apprehension. If you were following me in the September-October months leading up to the 60th anniversary, I made, I think it was 2 videos where I was talking about how I was skeptical about what was going to happen in the 60th anniversary specials. I don't feel that similar way about series 14. I don't. I feel like I'm going into these episodes a lot more positive than I was, say, the Star Beast. But at the same time, there is a small, just a teensy bit of me that's like, they could fumble this. And I really don't want them to. Squish King says, surprised and disappointed by the lack of TARDIS interior shots considering this is supposed to be episode 1. Wanted to see 15 manhandling that console. What do you mean by that? 1995 Ben Thomas says, I feel like Mrs. Flood is either the or a worker of the meddling monk. Yeah, I was just talking about it. She encouraged / tempted Isaac Newton to the tree until he came up with the idea as if she knew something was going to happen. Was that in Wild Blue Yonder? Then in this episode she knew the TARDIS and encouraged Ruby to follow him. She's definitely meddling with time behind the scenes, and the goblins with their own time manipulations was another indicator of this. Time will tell, but Russell did say there's a reason the intro has that strange effect when the TARDIS interacts with the vortex, as if time is changing whenever the Doctor interacts with it. You know, just talking about that specific bit, I've always had the headcanon that every single trip in the TARDIS just slightly changes the timeline, and that when things get retconned, it's like an accumulative effect of all of the travels in the TARDIS slightly changing one tiny thing, and then eventually that changes a big thing. i.e. the fact that the Doctor says that he met Isaac Newton and explained gravity to him in, I think it's the Pirate Planet. I'm pretty sure it's that episode. And yet in Wild Blue Yonder we see the Doctor meet Isaac Newton again. I just see it as a kind of, he's had so many trips in the TARDIS, there's been so many small shifts in the timeline that things just kind of reverted back to the way they were before. But anyway, where was I? They'll have to deal with the fact that Ruby and the Doctor were never supposed to meet, and their meeting started the chain reaction for whatever the big bad thing is leading up to. That'd be cool. Not to mention that it's been almost 50 years since the monk's last TV appearance with the Doctor, and I'm willing to bet she did place Ruby at that church as a way to set the dominoes in place. I wonder if it will turn out she actually stole Ruby from her birth parents. I kind of doubt that. Maybe even wiped them from time, which is why there's no trace. That's what happened to Amy's parents. Just a theory, but it makes more sense to me than the Rani. It's an awesome theory. I really like the idea that the Doctor and a companion who were never supposed to meet did meet, and that caused a chain reaction. That's really cool. It kind of reminds me of Charlie from the 8th Doctor Adventures. Of course it's different, but you know, kind of similar idea. I don't know if that's the direction they're gonna go with, but if it isn't, they should have hired you because you got a better plan. I don't think that Mrs. Flood would be a worker, because if you're an underling and you can break the fourth wall, the boss is gonna be crazy. The meddling monk can't break the fourth wall, so how can the worker of the meddling monk mess with the fourth wall? I think that's another thing. Mrs. Flood, as someone who did actually quite enjoy that end of episode stinger, for a lot of people it just flew way over their heads, which means that sadly I think it has to be a flop. I've been looking around to see a bunch of reactions to that scene, and a lot of people seem focused on the fact that Mrs. Flood knows what a TARDIS is. And to me, I've got no idea how that's the first thing you pick up on. How do you notice that, but you don't notice the fact that she's literally talking to the camera? She's speaking to you. She's winking at the camera. It's a fourth wall break. I think I must have watched at least 10 different reactions to that scene, not including people who I actually watched the episode with in real life. And I think only 3 people out of all of them noticed that it was a fourth wall break. And the majority of people, even those who knew that it was a fourth wall break, also thought that it was just a joke because it's Christmas. And I don't think either of those are the results that you want to see. I think Mrs. Flood is meant to be a full big time villain. And I think that her speaking directly to the camera is meant to be a really big deal. It's just that a lot of people, for whatever reason, didn't see it as a big deal. I don't know, guys. I also like the theory that Miss Flood was mimicked / replaced with this entity because of how she reacted earlier in the episode to now. I like that. I think that's also really creepy. The idea of this cosmic fourth wall breaking entity that can take the form of anyone. Scary, man. As I mentioned in the past video, that actress who they got to play her, I think her name is Anita Dobson, I'm pretty sure. She did a great job. She was creepy as hell. For me, the only theory that I could possibly have for Mrs. Flood is that she's the one who picked up the Master Tooth. I almost said the Master Ring. No, the Master Tooth at the end of the last episode. That's my only theory. I would say I'm not a theory crafter, but you guys guys know me, you guys know I love theories. It's just I'm so burnt out with all the mystery boxes, especially when you know that the majority of them aren't gonna get a satisfying ending. The Stratus Geo says it was a very nice Sarah Jane Adventures episode. It did kind of have that vibe, didn't it? The music is so much better though. Mischief with Mia says you can cry post-therapy. You're still emotionally connected, it's not continuing to damage you. I wanted to include these comments because a criticism I got in my last video is a lot of people saying, you don't know how therapy works. That's not how therapy works. You can still cry post-therapy. Because I say, well, I'll just post a clip of what I said. Another thing they mention is the 15th Doctor bringing up that he's adopted, of course a reference to the Timeless Child. He even starts crying, which is another reason why the you need to be my therapy shit just doesn't work, because he's crying about stuff that he should have resolved in the past episode. Now that scene would make a lot of sense if this episode came after Power of the Doctor, but after the giggle, I don't know. I feel like that's not really this episode's fault though. And I don't think that these people who are calling me out are wrong. I just think that they're not understanding where I'm coming from, which is that I'm not talking about real life therapy. I'm not talking about real life at all. I'm talking about in the context of a fictional TV show. In the context of the fictional TV show Doctor Who, it's unsatisfying to have a character say that they're doing rehab out of order and they're getting over all of their trauma, and then in the direct follow-up next episode have them cry over that trauma. And I don't have a problem with the Doctor crying over the trauma. I think that's interesting. I think it's a compelling part of the episode. My problem comes in the inconsistency in the writing and the lack of commitment on the plot angle of this is rehab out of order. So while I am completely sure that you guys know everything you're talking about when you say that you can cry post-therapy, I don't doubt that for a single second. That makes perfect sense to me. In the context of a TV show, it makes no sense. Here's another one. Therapy doesn't just get rid of problems though. They are still there. He's just better at dealing with them. I think now is a good time to say that in the actual episode, The Giggle, they don't mention therapy. That's just me talking. So when you say stuff to me about therapy and all of that, the word they use is rehab. And then, of course, I think this just links back to the previous comment in that it just isn't satisfying from a writing perspective. The episode works better without the ending to The Giggle, which is a problem. It's a problem with the era as a whole, and I do kind of wish they would at least have just one-off line saying, oh, the 14th Doctor's gone, or oh, he regenerated into me, or oh, I regenerated too early and maybe that's why some of this stuff blah blah blah. Just something, anything to put that shit to rest, because it's eating away at me and I can't really enjoy this new era until that past storyline has been officially ended. I mean, it's strange, isn't it? It feels like an anti-ending. I don't think I've ever felt so dissatisfied going forward. I remember at the end of series 12, at the end of The Timeless Children, I felt a little weirded out by the direction that the plot went in. Not that I didn't see it coming. I think that the Doctor being the Timeless Child was one of the most obvious plot twists they've ever done, beaten only by Missy being the Master. But I did want to see what would happen next. I remember when series 12 ended, I felt like, oh my goodness, I can't wait for the next episode. Even if I didn't particularly love the direction the story is going with the Timeless Child, I still can't wait for series 13. And I feel like that's the closest feeling I've had to the ending of The Giggle, except the ending of The Giggle, I wasn't really looking forward to new Doctor Who. Is that weird to say? It really took the wind out of my sails. And just casts a terrible shadow looming over the whole era. And I must confess, I don't feel like I'm exaggerating when I say that. When I was watching this episode, it was a good episode, and yet I couldn't stop thinking about the end of The Giggle. This is meant to be a video about the church on Ruby Road, and yet I've spent over half of it talking about the ending of The Giggle. I imagine that when we get on to the new season, I will still be talking about the ending of The Giggle, because it is such a baffling, terrible, demotivating, creative choice. And I just wish that that wasn't the direction they decided to go down. But anyway, enough of that, let's go on to the next comment. My theory is that the person who drops Ruby at the church is River Song. Well, that'd be a turn up for the books, wouldn't it? The Fud Factory. She released he's a time traveler and wants to find her mother. Also, did you not realize the opening scene wasn't the same as when he arrived to save baby Ruby? That will be from the end of the season. Cool. No hate to this guy, of course, but I do find it funny. I got a lot of comments using this timestamp specifically where I say, I don't really know why Ruby is going with the doctor. Ruby Sunday, it feels like she's having a good time. She's having a nice life. She's living her life. Yeah, she's unlucky, but the funny thing is that literally 5 seconds later, I also come to the realization that this comment did that she wants to go to find her mom. Ruby Sunday, it feels like she's having a good time. She's having a nice life. She's living her life. Yeah, she's unlucky, but I assume the answer to that question is her parents trying to find out who she is, where she came from. Do remember that those first reactions are unscripted. They are my literal, raw, first impressions, initial thoughts. So while at the time I didn't get it, I literally did click 2 and 2 together while I was speaking, literally while I was speaking in the same sentence. But I do find it interesting the thing that you point out in the second part of your comment, which is that the opening scene wasn't from the same time as the ending. I didn't notice that. I've watched the episode a couple times and I still never noticed that. So maybe that's true, maybe it's not true. I think it's cool either way, and it might be a cool way at the end of the season to circle back to it if they do go to the church again. I think that'd be cool. I'm all for more of that. It was visually amazing. This also links back to music. There was a lot of licensed music in this episode. There were 2 recognizable tracks. I'm not going to play them, of course, because copyright, but usually in Doctor Who Christmas specials, especially Russell T Davies Doctor Who Christmas specials, they didn't have access to the funds to get real Christmas songs. So instead they would get the ones from the BBC archive and they would play it every single Christmas. Real ones know what that is. So it is quite funny to now hear, real actual Christmas songs being played in the Doctor Who episode. And I thought it was cool. I thought it was cool to see. That also added atmosphere to the final church set piece, which is why I bring it up. This guy says, went into it with good faith, in quotation marks, laughing emoji, sweat mark emoji, laugh crying emoji, ruffle emoji, ruffle emoji. I don't know what he's trying to say here, but I did go into it in good faith. I did, and I enjoyed the episode as well, so there's the proof. It's something I find really interesting. I couldn't find the comment, but I was searching for it. I think he must have deleted it. There was a guy who commented on the same video that this guy commented, calling me a Disney shill, which is just crazy. But the fact that we have both people saying that I went into it in bad faith, but also that I'm a Disney shill, I feel like that shows that I'm pretty even-handed, right? If both sides are calling me out. Either way, I think that I go into it in good faith. I obviously want to enjoy every Doctor Who episode. I of course want Doctor Who to be good. I want every episode to be good. And the proof is that I have a channel which has a vested interest in Doctor Who being good. My videos do better the more well received an episode of Doctor Who is. And of course, even outside of that, I want Doctor Who to succeed. I love the show. It's my favorite show of all time. I of course want it to be popular and I of course want it to be good. So why would I not go into it in good faith? This is a good one. The episode as a whole felt fun. It wasn't taking itself too seriously, and I love how the new RTD era is leaning into camp a lot more than it has been. I love the new Sonic. It's weird, and I think that fits Chuti's portrayal. I think it's a really interesting design. I was originally holding out on maybe doing a full analysis video on it, but I don't think people would care. So I'm just going to talk about it here because I've sat and I've thought about it, and I've thought about Chuti's portrayal as the Doctor in quite a large amount of depth since the episode came out. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this in the comment section below. So hear me out on what I say, and if you agree/disagree, comment your reasons why and we can have a cool discussion. I think that'd be cool. But ever since Doctor Who returned in the revival 2005, the sonic screwdriver has been a core symbol of the show. It's part of the iconography with the TARDIS, the Doctor, sonic screwdriver. It's on all the posters. The Doctor's always wielding it in a cool pose in all of the promo pics, posters, everything. And I think that if you were to do a kind of deep analysis of why the sonic screwdriver fits so well on all these images, it's because, can't think of a better term, it's a phallic symbol. And I don't like using that word because it feels a bit gross, but it is what it is. It fulfills the same role as like a gun on a movie poster. If you look at a bunch of movie posters, you'll see this. Or Thor's hammer, weapons, stuff like that. All this stuff looks great on posters because it's just one of those subliminal objects which looks cool. And this sonic screwdriver isn't one of them. This sonic screwdriver is not a phallic symbol. In fact, it's the opposite. It's a yonic symbol, which is the opposite to a phallic symbol in that it's a feminine symbol. Imagine a strawberry. That's what this looks like, which means you can't use it in all of the cool poses that, say, the 14th Doctor sonic screwdriver was used in on the posters. And I think the reasoning for this is that Russell T Davies is trying to show the character of the 15th Doctor is more in touch with his feminine side, because he's the first Doctor, not including the 14th Doctor because he doesn't count, who has been both a man and a woman. And so there is more elements of this Doctor which is just both, if that makes sense. And the sonic screwdriver is an example of one of them. I also think it's an attempt from Russell T Davies to dismantle some of the masculine elements of the character, which I will leave it up to you to decide on whether or not that's a good thing or bad thing or whatever thing. As I said, I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on this below. Maybe I'm just chatting out my arse, but I've been thinking about it and this is just some stuff which came to mind. And I think a lot of people don't like this new sonic screwdriver because it is such a departure from what we had before. For me, to be honest, to be perfectly honest, I don't really care for it. I don't think it's bad or anything. I just don't think it's that cool either. But I also didn't really like the 14th Doctor's sonic screwdriver. So I'm beginning to move to the mindset of maybe the 12th Doctor was right and it's time to move away from the sonic screwdriver for a little bit. The 13th Doctor's design was really cool and I did like the 12th Doctor's, but it was underused. The 13th Doctor is a really cool design. If you have the toy, you know it fits really well in your hand, and that's one of the reasons I really like it. It's also yellow, which means that it shines really well in dark environments. But if we look at the two recent attempts on sonic screwdrivers, they're just kind of mid. What I think would be cool would be like a sonic wristwatch or something. What would you call it? Like a sonic gauntlet. Could be like an Omnitrix from Ben 10. You guys know what I'm talking about. And it can be like Captain Jack's vortex manipulator, but also double as a sonic screwdriver. Of course, that's not the best idea in the world. It's just something I'm throwing out randomly. If I could sit and think on it, I'll probably come up with a great idea. Of course, there is no real need to abandon the sonic screwdriver in general. I mean, it works fine. But there is a real departure in symbolism in this recent one, which is why I understand why a lot of people aren't the biggest fan. Cartoon Game 5007 says, I love this app. One thing that worries me though is Disney's complete fumbling of everything so far. The anniversary specials were marked as specials 1 to 3, which is fine, but this one is marked as special 4. I noticed that. Unless season 1, I know you, manages to do super well as an introduction to both the Doctor and Ruby, it's not going to bode well for the new era, as it's going to be super confusing for new viewers. This episode is genuinely as good as Rose in setting up parts of Doctor Who for new viewers, but it's marked as special 4, not even as the Doctor Who Christmas special. Trust me, Disney loves their Christmas specials and putting them in collections. Why didn't they do that? I don't know. I have no idea why they didn't call this the Christmas special. It is so concerning to me. Specials 1 to 3 are a bad place to start, but with this numbering and confusing messaging, it's almost saying those are the new jumping off point. There's been no advertising that I've seen, which is concerning even more so because, well, when the supposed big marketing push for season 1 starts, where are they going to point new viewers? Season 1, which won't be able to introduce either of them as well as the special did, to special 4, which will be jarring when they see it's a Christmas special being pushed in spring months after release, or the anniversary specials. Yeah, I see what you mean. I'm worried about the show's Disney Plus future, to say the least. I am too, and obviously as someone who's watching in the UK, I don't use Disney Plus to watch Doctor Who, but I do know the pain, and I did also see that it was labelled as Special 4 for some reason. What the hell were they thinking? I also think that having this episode be the introduction is a little weird. I do think that season 1, episode 1, if they expect us to call it that and not actually series 14, which which is what it is. I think that's going to have a lot to live up to if it's meant to actually be a starting point for Doctor Who for like new viewers. And honestly, I have no idea why they did that to themselves. This comment says that the church on Ruby Road is genuinely as good at Rose in setting up parts of Doctor Who. I don't really know, because I don't have the experience of new viewers jumping on at this point and seeing if they can follow along or not. But as an episode itself, I do actually think this episode rivals Rose in terms of quality. People get mad at me whenever I say this, but the very start of series 1, so like the first 3 episodes, is not as strong as we would all like to remember it being. For me, I really like Aliens in London, the Slitheen episode, but Dalek, to me, is the main part where series 1 goes from it's fun, it's good, to this is really great. And the first 3 episodes, that being Rose, End of the World and Unquiet Dead, I personally think they're a little bit meh. Rose is definitely really nostalgic for me. I can look over a bunch of the problems because it's episode 1 of the 2005 TV show. End of the World, on the other hand, I don't really extend that benefit of the doubt. And similarly with Unquiet Dead, I just don't really like those episodes. So I won't necessarily disagree that this episode is as good as Rose. I think it may be a teensy bit lower down. I think it may be just a little bit worse and Rose is a little bit better. But I would genuinely be really interested to see what first impression new viewers thought of the church on Ruby Road. I personally think it probably wouldn't be that good an introduction. I also think that if you're introducing Doctor Who and you're not going with Rose, you should just do it out of order. But then again, those are just my thoughts. Speaking on Disney Plus specifically, my big problem with the new Series 14 is that it's only 8 episodes long. And that may not seem like a big problem, but it is. It's a massive problem. There is not enough time in the series. Every series now feels like a mini series, which isn't fun. I feel like 10 episodes was barely pushing it. The ideal is 12, right? And I understand the media landscape has changed, but 8 episodes is just not enough, especially when we know that at least half of them are written by the same writer. That only leaves at most 4 episode slots for new people to get in. So we know that they finished filming Series 2 and the Christmas special for Series 2. That leaves 21 episodes in Russell T Davies 2 so far. And if my math is correct, 13 of them are gonna be written by Russell T Davies, which is well over half. Hopefully I'll be able to do the math on screen and I'll post the percentage of which episodes are written by Russell T Davies. Either way, that's too much for both him and for the show in general. The poor guy is gonna be dead if the schedule is as grueling as he described it last time. Something I also want to mention is the fact that Doctor Who is now more or less a Disney Plus show, which fucking terrible. It sucks, man. I'm sure that a bunch of you are aware of the current state of Disney Plus shows, but if you are not, lucky you. They are terrible. This is meant to be a Doctor Who video, so I'm not gonna rant and rave about why these shows are garbage, but we all know they are. And also, if you remember, a couple weeks ago, I compared The Star Beast to feeling like an episode in Mandalorian Series 3. And even though I'm not like a mega hater of Disney Star Wars, I did not mean that as a compliment. I don't want to start a Star Wars war in the comments section below. For the record, I'm definitely not a hater of the new stuff. I pretty much enjoy all of Star Wars, to be honest, even the bad stuff. But I have a big problem with all of the Disney Plus shows apart from Mandalorian Season 1 and Andor, in that they would probably be better if they were just movies. In fact, I would say that pretty much every Disney Plus show, whether that be Marvel or Star Wars, apart from Andor, that's the one exception, have basically the same problems. And I really wish that Doctor Who does not suffer from them as well. Now, I know what people are going to say. They're going to be like, oh, totally different production team, totally different blah blah blah. But we know that Disney's money is the main driving force now. We know that Russell T Davies is getting notes from Disney. we know that they are heavily influencing quite a few of the creative decisions in the story and outside. It is not unreasonable to be wary that Doctor Who might turn out to be another one of these terrible, shitty ass Disney Plus shows. And if that happens, that is my nightmare scenario. Blocky Dude says, I've seen the He Who Waits thing all over Doctor Who Reddit. What is it? Did I walk out of the room in a recent episode and miss it? When was this? So this was in The Giggle, in the scene where the Celestial Toymaker cuts the deck and he does the double drop of 2 mystery boxes back to back, which is the Master's Tooth and then He Who Waits, who the Toymaker was gonna play a game with, but then he ran away. To be honest, I understand the confusion because there are so many mystery boxes just being spammed per episode. We're an average of 3 now per episode. It does get hard to keep up, especially when you see the resolution of some of them. The 14th Doctor's clothes, for example. Why did the clothes change in the regeneration? They just did. There is a meta explanation given out of the context of the program, and it's so mind-bendingly dumb that I don't even want to explain it. In a future video I will go into that, but I find it hard to muster the faith that all of these plot arcs will get a satisfying resolution. Unless it's Sutek, baby, then we're back in business. Aeon says, for someone who didn't want 14 to exist, you sure think about him a lot.
What do you mean by that?
Lol, I kid. I get your point though. It is distracting knowing he's out there, but I'll personally leave that for fan theories and fanfic. I enjoyed the episode even though I didn't think he was as likable as the 60th anniversary specials, but it had a lot of great and deep emotional moments that I'm still thinking about hours later. Example, why are you crying? Why are you crying? I'm definitely curious about how the Doctor and Ruby relate to each other in terms of both being orphans, not knowing much about where they came from, and how their relationship develops. Good start. Merry Christmas. And a Happy New Year to you too. Yeah, I do think about 14 a lot. That's a fair criticism. It's because I didn't want him to exist. It feels like since Power of the Doctor aired, and even before that when the casting was first announced, I've been criticizing the decision and I've just been getting more and more relentless in my criticism of it. But yeah, Merry Christmas to you too. Merry late Christmas, I suppose. I agree with the bi-generation thing and the giggle stuff. I really don't know why Russell T Davies did that. To be honest, I don't either. He says he always wanted it, but why? There's a lot of stuff I just keep asking, but why too? Russell T Davies said he didn't want to have multi-doctor, like a traditional multi-doctor story in the 60th because we have so many. We have like 4 in 60 years. What is he talking about? And then he's like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool if the future Doctor merged out of the past Doctor and then they teamed up? No, it's just not a good idea. Regeneration is the best idea of extending a show ever created. It's the reason why Doctor Who's still here today. And messing with that is just dangerous business because the alternative is just never gonna be as good. And bi-generation isn't as good because while it is an alternative, there is no logic behind it. There is no explanation. It's just something happened for some reason. And it's so clunky and it doesn't make any sense. And I suppose because this video is out late, I owe it to all of you to talk about this. It kind of ties into the Doctorverse headcanon theory that Russell T Davies came up with on the commentary to The Giggle, which is, it's the worst idea I've ever heard. If you've never heard of this before, Russell T Davies puts forward the idea, he doesn't make it canon, but he just puts forward the idea that a bi-generation happens with every incarnation of the Doctor. So the first Doctor bi-generates into Patrick Troughton, and then William Hartnell still exists and there's 2 of them, and then that continues on with the 2nd Doctor, 3rd Doctor, 4th Doctor, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and then of course 14th bi-generates naturally in the show as well. And he thinks there's a whole universe of all of the Doctors out there, and he says, what's the harm? Because that's technically how it is anyway. And if you need me to explain why that idea just doesn't work, then lucky you. No, I'm kidding. Peter Capaldi gave a really wonderful quote on the cycle of death and the importance of letting go and why it's so key and intrinsic to the value of Doctor Who.
It has all these other levels of philosophical and reflective nature that make it very, very rich. People always ask me, what is it about the show that appeals so broadly? The answer I would like to give, and which I'm discouraged from giving because it is not useful in the promotion of a brand, is that it's about death. And it has a very, very powerful death motif in it, which is that the central character dies. And I think that is one of its most potent mysteries, because somewhere in that, people see that that's what happens in life. You have loved ones, and then they go. But you must carry on.
And it's a whole lot more thoughtful than, well, actually, all of them live. You know, part of the appeal of the story is that they are gone. Putting aside the fact that it doesn't work at all logically, it doesn't work thematically, it doesn't work with the basic entrenched ideas of the show, it doesn't work emotionally. The idea, straight up, doesn't work. Damn, you know what would have been cool? You know what would have been cooler than By Generation? Imagine this. They're on the roof, the toy maker's got the gun pointed on everyone, and just when you think there's no way for the Doctor to win, how the hell is he gonna get out of this one? You hear the TARDIS from behind the toy maker. He turns around, and in the middle of the air, there's the TARDIS. We're like, what? Who's flying the TARDIS? How's the TARDIS here? Zoom in, triumphant music builds, boom. The door opens, and it's the 15th Doctor, the new Doctor. He's here to save the day. The TARDIS then glides onto the hangar. He comes out, he's already in his new clothes. He says he's the Doctor from the future. Then you have him save the day. And you know what? You can literally have your cake and eat it too. By having this be an incarnation from the future that comes back to save the day, effectively what you have done is created a new grey area, a new gap in the timeline. In the same way that there was a gap between the 8th Doctor and the 9th Doctor, who knows what could have happened between the 14th Doctor and the 15th Doctor? There could even be a secret incarnation between them. You know what you could do then? You could say that something happened in those unknown years. That could be the new version of the Time War. It would be a great way to reboot the show, and a lot less confusing than this By Generation nonsense, which they stuck with for some reason. But anyway, let's move on to Stray Maverick's comment. You talked about how 10 mentioned fate before, but 10 mentions fate in a spiritual sense. When 15 talks about luck here and how this is new, he's talking about how it's essentially a new language being added into the universe. New methods of science introduced into the universe since the Toymaker, as he makes it clear it's not magic. Essentially, the universe has introduced loads of new scientific fields, and this one focuses on luck and coincidence. I love the idea that the Doctor is no longer all-knowing. We finally get to see him figure out larger questions related to the universe instead of just smaller problems. It's a quick moment, but Ruby being a band is why I think she broke out into song. She's clearly musical herself, and why I think music may play a large role in the coming season. There's the jukebox in the TARDIS, and the new villain whose costume has piano keys on it. So it might just be that each episode deals with a new language introduced in the episode, with the overarching language being music. I think that's a great assessment. I touched on this before. I don't want them to overdo the music thing. I see it. I see everything that this guy explained being set up, be set up. The band, the jukebox, the language of music, that's really cool. That was set up in the giggle as well. At the same time, I still feel like this isn't as new a concept as people are making it out to be. Also, this links to a common criticism which I've been seeing floating around the fandom recently, which is the idea of fantasy being put over sci-fi. With Rusty Davies saying that he intends to push the show in a more fantasy route instead of hard sci-fi. And it made me start wondering, what do I personally prefer? Because I'm not too crazy on putting restrictions on writers and saying, oh, you can't write Doctor Who this way, and you have to write it this way, blah, 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 blah. I think if Rusty Davies wants to do fantasy, that's perfectly fine by me. But I must confess, to me, if I look at my personal favorite episodes, the ones I prefer usually do have more of a grounding in reality than the more whimsical, fantastical episodes and elements that I imagine Rusty Davies intends to bring in. Scummer says, this is a super Moffat feeding episode for me in the best of ways. The cracks jumping back to solve an issue, the speedy one-liners, Ruby feels like a fab Moffat companion with a touch of Russell to make her feel more grounded and relatable. To me, this episode restored my faith somewhat in the new series. While I love lots about the 360th specials, I thought the rollercoaster pacing was scary for the future of storytelling. Seeing Russell T Davies set up a new character and family nice and slowly, like we got in Rose, made me so happy. Yep, I fully understand that. I think to me, Ruby just kind of feels like a modern extension of Rose, whereas Rose felt really 2000s, mid-2000s. Ruby is kind of an equivalent of that in the new age, which I suppose isn't really a compliment, but it's also not really a complaint either. For me, I enjoyed the episode. I liked a lot of the cheekier elements of it. I found them funny and they made me laugh. And overall, yeah, I think I enjoyed this episode to the majority of what we got in the 60th anniversary specials. M. Stewart says, totally agree on the editing. The scene where he gets out of the TARDIS and stares at the house and then gets sad and says, maybe I'm the bad luck, as if he didn't want to be in Ruby's life, but then he opens the door and welcomes her in. Very odd. Something got lost in the edit. Yeah, there's a little bit of weird stuff there. At the same time though, I do think it was cool that the TARDIS is the one that chooses the companion and lets her in. I think that's cool. Don H. Banks says, it wasn't the best Doctor Who episode and there were some rough parts, but I absolutely loved it. After years of having a Doctor that doesn't feel or have the aura of the Doctor for so long, Joan Martin did for me, but she wasn't the main one. It's so refreshing and amazing to see Ncuti instantly have that from the giggle, and even more so here. For me, I never really had that problem with Jodie Whittaker. She always felt like the Doctor to me. To me, she feels really Doctorish, as does Ncuti Gatwa. I can fully understand why Rusty Davies, Moffat, and everyone who saw him said that he was instantly the Doctor. He is truly terrifyingly good. I don't know about that. To me, like, truly terrifyingly good is Peter Capaldi. I think he's really good though. I love how the salt thread from Wild Blue Yonder has seemingly opened up the universe to otherworldly and beyond our understanding of the universe threads. I don't know if this is actually the case, just my own headcanon. I don't know either, but I assume it's the case. Also, other people might have a problem with it, but I love the extra gadgets the Doctor now hopefully has. It always felt like a missed opportunity that a super advanced ancient time traveler only had one tool to help him, and I love how short and limited the life cycle of these gadgets felt. I hope it continues. Yeah, same, that's really cool. The Mavati gloves, with, I suppose we're talking about the Wild Blue Yonder thing now. But yeah, I think the threads from that episode are continuing on. The Mavati gag, which in my giggle review I called out for not needing to be there, I suppose it's still going. I still don't know if it's meant to be a joke or a story arc, but I suppose I take back my taking back of giving it the benefit of the doubt, because if it's still keeping on going and it might be resolved in the future, then maybe there is a reason for why it has to be included. But if it is only a joke and it's not meant to be taken seriously, then I untake back my taking back of my take back of saying that it's not relevant. Did that make sense? But anyway, onto the gloves. Yeah, it'd be really cool if there was an assortment of gadgets every episode. I mentioned the Sonic Gauntlet earlier in the video. I'm just saying stuff at this point. I think it'd be really cool to have the Doctor have an accessory belt, like he's Batman or something. I thought that'd be pretty fun. Millie was great, and I love her and her family's dynamic, so do I. And while I still despise the Timeless Child, Rusty Davies is doing more than Chibi did and actually making me warm to it, even though I hope it's retconned as just a prank ASAP. Now, the thing is with the Timeless Child is I do think the most satisfying explanation they can give to it, and this might sound really harsh, but I genuinely think the best way to resolve that story arc is for the Doctor to not be the Timeless Child, for it to be a lie, for it to be someone else. Can be the Master, that's one that's been going around the fandom forever now. But I think that's the best way to kind of wrap up that story arc, which is a failure of the concept. But with that said, I think Chris Chibnall and Rusty Davies have been doing about equal amounts, which is a massive compliment to Rusty Davies because it isn't his story arc, it's not his idea. But I do think that Chris Chibnall did a bit more with the plot than people are giving him credit. Flux is fun, guys. Joey Underwood, this is a cool YouTuber, says, Ruby being part of a band probably wasn't mentioned again in this episode because they're probably setting up her skills for the musical/Beatles episode. I think that works better, set it up now, pay it off later. I definitely agree. I think I replied to this comment saying I didn't really want it to be paid off in this episode because it doesn't really need to be. It's just a kind of extra background detail to build up the character and to build up the world, which is all very much appreciated. In fact, I feel it would be a bit inorganic if it was just randomly brought up again. Although I suppose you could say her singing is that, even though she plays keyboard. I love this episode. Ncuti makes a great first impression and so did the actress playing the new companion. I have to say, I really don't get the sense you mentioned that 14 still being out there like hangs over the show. Well, I already said this a million times, right? For me, it's an unresolved plot line with a major character in the show, the Doctor, the main character. It is hard for me to just forget about it. And I know that the show basically just said, forget about it. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about it anymore. But to me, it needs more than that. It needs genuine, actual closure. And when you take the metatextual context of the 14th Doctor being played by David Tennant, who has loomed over the show since around 2014, when everyone's like, David Tennant should come back. David Tennant should come back, like the NPCs that they are. It makes it even worse for me. I did not want David Tennant to come back. If he came back as the 10th Doctor, fine. But as the 14th, fuck no, man. And then to have him not regenerate? What the fuck is this? To me, I'm gonna have to turn it back on you. I don't understand. In fact, I really don't understand how you guys can just block out the fact that the 14th Doctor is right there. I wish I could be that forgiving. If this was the Chibnall era, people would not be that forgiving. I'm just saying. I don't think I've ever seen a showrunner be held to such a high standard as Chris Chibnall and then to such a low standard as Russell T Davies. Russell T Davies gets away with fucking everything. Chris Chibnall, he'd put one toe out of line, people would crucify him. The Chris Chibnall hate is so bad that people call him out for episodes he didn't even write. The Chris Chibnall hate is so bad that I got a comment earlier saying that they didn't mind that an unearthly child has been taken off BBC iPlayer because they retconned the first Doctor. Bro cares more about the retcon than the episode being actually gone. That is crazy. The hate boner that people have for the Chris Chibnall era needs to be fucking examined. People will go out of their way to hate on literally every single thing associated with the era. You will find people who will literally be incapable of saying anything positive about it whatsoever. They will say that every single frame of every single episode produced by him is bad. Then meanwhile, you could have Russell T Davies who could literally record a piece of paper for 50 minutes and then put it up and people would still defend it. GRW says, I was positively surprised by this episode. I thought visually it was a bit bland. I don't know, aside from the church scenes, it was just really bright all episode. I get that. I came in expecting it to be doo-doo, but it was good. I thought Ruby was excited by the prospect of time travel, but it means that she could go back in time and find out who her parents were. Maybe it was just a placement of the dialogue, but I really gathered from when she had her little monologue. I think it was cool, creative story with the stuff about coincidences and the stuff where the monk kept going on about before the timeline cracked. I love the idea that the Doctor had no idea what he was talking about when explaining all the goblin stuff to her on the ladder, and he was kind of figuring it out at the same time. This and Wild Blue Yonder make up for the other two stinkers, so the average quality is like in the middle. I am excited for May. The rapport between the two of them felt like it came a bit too quick, but I guess you can only do so much in an hour of runtime. Some cool cinematography, I will say, and no real bad VFX, and the song was a banger to be fair. W. Jacob 4T says they definitely give best friend energy. Russell T Davies better not make a love story out of this. So I'm personally gunning for the no love story route. You guys know me, you know that's what I'm always going for. So I am biased in this comment's favor. I hope that that's the route they're going. To me, I didn't really get a lot of crazy romantic signs from the episode, but I'm just kind of illiterate when it comes to stuff like that, so I've got no clue. So yeah, definitely agree with you on that. January Rain says, you said about Wild Blue Yonder that it made you excited for Doctor Who again, I think. Did I say that? That doesn't sound like something I would say. But for me, it was this episode. I love David Tennant as much as the next guy, but WBW just felt like more of the same. In a good way, but also in a predictable way. True. This episode felt energized and interesting in a way I haven't felt with Doctor Who in a long time. I feel like people say that about every episode. The musical number was fun and campy, and I thought the episode did a good job of making me care about Ruby and her story. Tutti, of course, was a triumph in every frame. That man can do no wrong from what I've seen so far, same. I get what you mean about the stacked mysteries and how disappointing it will be if we don't get all the answers, but I can't help but be intrigued. My main concern is him pulling some whack shit with 14 in the future and forcing Tennant in again where he isn't needed, because again, Tutti is killing it. Overall, it was quite a fun ride with a fun new alien species with an interesting power base and an electric Doctor and an interesting enough companion. Obviously not the best episode of Doctor Who ever to exist, but I think it's perfectly functional as an intro and Christmas episode, and I'm exceedingly excited to see where we go from here, smiley face. Hell yeah, completely agree. I think it's interesting that I see the same comment over and over again when it comes to the "this is the most I've cared about Doctor Who in years" comment, because I remember when people were saying that about Series 11 after Series 8, 9 and 10, people were saying, oh, Series 11 is the best Doctor I've felt in years. And then I remember with Spyfall, when that episode came out, people were saying this is the best Doctor Who in years. And then I remember when the Halloween Apocalypse came out, people were saying this is the best Doctor Who in years. And then I remember when the Star Beast came out and people were saying it's the best Doctor Who in years. And then with Wild Blue Yonder, people were saying it's the best Doctor Who in years. And then with The Giggle, and now this episode, I think I've heard it every single time. I don't really know why. The quality for me, is not all that different between them. For me, I think the reason I was so critical of the Star Beast is because I had expectations in the wrong area. And now that the specials have finally all come to an end, my expectations have come to a more reasonable area, which is that I'm expecting this series, this upcoming Series 14, to be about the same level as Series 9, 12, 13, around that level, which isn't bad at all. I like all those series, but it isn't anything different. I wanted a breath of fresh air. I wanted something completely new, striking and bold, and this new era of Doctor Who doesn't really look to be that. It looks to be more of the same, which is fine now that I know what to expect. But that's what I'm expecting going into the new series, pretty much more of the same, which I'm fine with. We've had more of the same for however many years now, but it is a little bit of a shame after getting all our hypes up. A generic human says, I thought it was mid, but a lot of post-regeneration stories are. Disagree. All I care about is the Doctor and the companion work. Agree. I have a pet peeve with adoption stories about wanting to find birth parents. I get that's a real thing that happens. I just think it's a bad message to send to adopted kids. I don't know what's up with the musicality of the show lately. The story felt very been there, done that. I kind of wish Russell T Davies was looking to the future. Definitely agree. Instead, he seems to be borrowing elements from his predecessors. I hope the show doesn't turn too magical. It will be too similar to Moffat's fairy tale elements. Honestly, the fact it's mid and the fact the specials were hit and miss has me a little worried about the future of the show. Definitely fair assessment about all of it. And I think about post-regeneration stories being mid, a lot of people kind of think that. I personally really like all of them, apart from Time and the Rani. That's the only one I don't like. I even like Twin Dilemma. I think with the message, I think they're not sending that message, or at least they're not trying to, so I won't hold that against the episode, but I get where you're coming from. Manny Bachelor says, man, I'm pumped for this new era, but all this foreshadowing has honestly got me exhausted already. It's just out here bugging me. Like, I get an instant sleepy reaction thinking about it. Same, bro. I feel far too convoluted by it all. But nah, I'm sure it will all be brilliant, probably. Maybe I'm just too engrossed in classic Who at the moment. John Pertwee is just feeling like current era to me. Let's go. This guy's the GOAT. He knows bull. He gets it. The story arcs for me are they're just too much. I'm sorry guys, there's too many per episode. Usually there is at most 3 per series. Before series 14 has even started, we are at 11. Clario says, I mean, it ain't. I actually ended up liking the Ruby Doctor Orphan parallel more than I expected. Same. Usually the soapy stuff puts me off, but the goblins feeding on coincidences made it make sense. That's true. Davies is good at writing characters and the acting definitely sold it for me, and Chuti gave me butterflies, looking forward to seeing more of his depth. Now the singing, ew. The Disneyfication of it all, ew. I prefer the cinematic but minimalist style of Jodie's era. It just looks so Disney remake. Something about the specials era feels messy and like the Disney money is taking them far but not far enough. It's Def Doctor Who when the first hour after the specials you can't decide if you love it or if you're giving up on the show forever. Very much looking forward to seeing more and excited about new stories. All in all, maybe a 6 out of 10. I think this is a really fair assessment and comment. The Disneyfication is so goddamn true. Jodie Whittaker's era looks incredible. Series 11 especially is just the best Doctor Who has ever looked. And the directing of, for example, Demons of the Punjab, let's just use that one as an example. It is so good. It's so good. It honestly makes all of this stuff seem weak by comparison, which is a shame because it's like 5 years later. Not even that, it's like 6 years later. And as I said earlier, it does kind of just remind me of Mandalorian Series 3. Kieran Pass says the 10th Doctor is living in France. The Fetch New Zealand says haters love to hate. I love this. No one has patience to see where the story is going. I do. I loved it too, buddy. Don't worry, you are not alone. I do think though, like, how long are we gonna have to wait? You know, like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? I think now is a really good time to talk about it because I've been interested in this and it's getting a little weird the more I think about it, which is the fact that Ncuti Gatwa may be already leaving. Have you guys considered that? So let me get this out here just before I start talking about this. I don't fully know. I don't know if Ncuti Gatwa is leaving after only 2 seasons. I don't know if he's gonna stay for 1 more. All I know is that filming on season 2 is already finished, or series 15 if you're a real person, and no one has seen Ncuti Gatwa film since then. It is shocking how far they filmed in advance. I think they are 18 episodes ahead. And if, say, the Christmas special after Series 15 is Chutagawa's final story, then that would mean he has 20 episodes in total, which is more than a few Doctors. He would have more screen time than 3 Doctors, I think he would, with that number of episodes. So it's not like it would be a shockingly low figure, but it would be pretty wild if he was leaving already. And if he's not, that's great. I'm very glad. I want to see more of him. It's great to have 3 series of a Doctor. The more the merrier, that's what I say. But if he is, you know I won't complain. I love new Doctors. If you guys know me, you know I love new Doctors. I love new content, I love new episodes, I love new characters. So you'll never see me saying no to a new Doctor unless it literally has only been like 5 episodes, in which case I will say no. As I say, the more the merrier. Leave your thoughts on Chutagawa potentially leaving / probably not leaving, but maybe leaving, in the comments section below. President Lemon says, I was fairly surprised it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. Millie is a fleshed out character, Chuti feels like a very physical Doctor. However, I can't shake the feeling that this is retreading the same ground as Rose. What I mean is this. Blonde woman with 4-letter R name, not seeing the interior of the TARDIS until she has to run around it, and her motivation for joining him seems to be so she can go back in time to find more about her family, like when Rose wanted to save Pete. Ruby is only interested in traveling with him after she finds out it's a time machine. Some more small thoughts. Ruby's grandmom was amazing, definitely agree with that. My family kept shouting, get that lady her cup of tea, and that psychic gloves or whatever were a good addition to the series, so long as it's limited use. 3 uses before running out of power. And lastly, I hate the Goblin song. 7 out of 10. Yeah, that's a really good assessment. I do find it funny that people said, oh, Russell T Davies, he would never come back to the show unless he had new stories to tell. And then he comes back and a bunch of people are like, wow, this is really like his old stories. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it is still funny. Ruby is very similar to Rose, and there's nothing wrong with that. As I said earlier in the video, it feels to me just kind of like an updated version. Airstrike says, there seems to be a through line with the criticisms of the new episodes. It's the ending. Most of the criticism seems to be about how the ending is bad in some way. It's a very astute observation and it's also quite true. I think the main reasoning for this is that the 45 to an hour format for Doctor Who just doesn't work anymore. Arguably, it never worked at all. But Doctor Who as a show is meant for the 20-minute 4-part format. Of course, you can go over, sometimes you can go under, but most Doctor Who stories would work the best if they are 4 20-minute long parts. Yes, you can also translate that into 2 40-minute episodes, which is why a lot of the best stories in Modern Who are longer ones, the 2-parters. But you will quickly run into problems, especially with the 3rd act of a bunch of these modern Doctor Who stories, simply because you don't have enough time. It's a really difficult juggling act, and I think a lot of people don't give all of the writers in general enough credit for being able to put anything even remotely understandable out onto the screen whatsoever, because it really is quite difficult to make a legible episode of Doctor Who. But yeah, definitely agree that the through line of criticism of this new era are its endings, its resolutions. Winter Wonderland says, crying doesn't mean you haven't gotten over a trauma. It's even the other way around. 15 is allowing his broken past to affect him in a way that 13 or 14 never could. Well, maybe 14 yes, but 13 no. She visibly cried multiple times. As I say, this episode would be perfect if it happened right after Power of the Doctor. Sadly, it doesn't, and so we have to go through the giggle and we have to run around in loops and bounds to try and make the ending to that story make any kind of sense. For the record, I don't think anyone who commented this was wrong or anything. I just think that the ending of the giggle still sucks. But to me, it's not necessarily that the points you're making are wrong, it's that the reasoning is trying to justify a plot point which doesn't work and doesn't need to be there. I'm still confused what we're even calling the new series. Is it just Classic Who, New Who, Post New Who, or Classic Who, and New Who? I think we're still just calling it Classic Who and New Who. That's what I'm doing. This new era is so arbitrary and just such a random reboot. I'm still just going to be calling it New Who. Gravity Gloves? What an odd name. What even is Gravity? I don't know. There's too many mysteries? Like seriously, what kind of a fan doesn't like some mysteries in their Doctor Who? Well, I like some mysteries. So there's quite a few. Sure, but Russell T Davies is capable of managing these things. We know that from his time as showrunner in the past. Do we? I feel unfortunately that's the issue really. You don't seem to like Russell T Davies, and by extension, his past eras. I love him. That's the vibe you give off. No. Now yes, if these mysteries never got revealed and we have loose ends and unresolved plot holes, you will be right, but we ain't there yet. Give the show a chance to set the stage and see if it can pay it off later. Dude, it's at a point where they're set up so much that they can't pay it off later. You need to have like 8 different episodes to fully explain all of the stuff that's being set up. Unless we start bundling the plot threads together, like we can make He Who Waits and the Legions and the Master's Tooth and Mrs. Flood. We could put all of those in one episode. But then we're still left with what's Mavity and why did the 14th Doctor's clothes change and why did the 14th Doctor come back in general and who's Ruby Sunday's mom? Do you see we're doubling up to such a point where it's really hard for all of this stuff to be resolved. And to me, it's not really like Russell T Davies ended on a particular high note when it comes to story arcs. The He Will Knock 4 times is one of the weakest in the show's history, and the bees disappearing, the darkness, if we look back, that shit straight up doesn't make any sense. So it turns out that the bees are actually aliens, and the darkness was the reality bomb that went off and was destroying all of reality. But somehow the reality bomb didn't go off because they stopped it. But if it did go off, then it would have destroyed all of reality. It just makes no sense. I love series 4. That plot arc makes no sense. And so personally, I feel like his track record isn't the cleanest, especially when it's got to the point where there are just so many that I'm beginning to lose track of them. At a certain point, it stops becoming a mystery and it starts becoming a chore. This episode was pretty good overall, even by your own admittance. Bro acts like I don't like Doctor Who, but you don't like the bi-generation thing and the 60th special, so you're dragging your heels rather than going with the flow and giving it a chance to prove itself. I did like the 60th specials. Guys, tell me I'm not crazy. I like Doctor Who, right? I have given all of the specials in this era a positive rating. I've liked every single one of them. Even the Star Beast, I like that one. I feel like the word admittance implies that I secretly wanted to hate this episode. Why? Why would I want to hate this episode? And if I did want to hate the episode, then I'd fucking hate it. I personally strive to be one of the realest people on YouTube. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a bias against any of the showrunners. I just call it how I see it. And if that means saying controversial things, then so be it. I've said so many controversial takes on this channel, I've lost count. I suggest you go into the next series by dropping how you felt about the 60th specials and just take it for what it is. Well, if I took your suggestion, then I would be dropping my positive feelings. So, sorry Jack. I do like your name though. Avatar Zhang says he's great. She's so-so. Might be time to retire the overused mystery girl companion plot device. They're trying to be Clara so damn bad. Smooth Blink says early viewers club. Let's fucking go. I'll be honest, I didn't think about 14 still being around at all. I wish I could be you, Claire Sunshine. Next Doctor will only have 6 episodes. The one after will only have 4. The one after will have only 2. And the next will only have a single episode per season. So we'll probably be 90 minutes, 2 hours long. Then we'll probably end. Damn, what a downer. It's true though. The Goblin song is hilariously bad. Russell T Davies is impressively bad at writing lyrics. Dev should have gotten someone else to do it. I think it's funny how bad it is, but I don't think that was intentional. Damn! I don't think it was that bad. That is so brutal. Very good Sarah Jabe adventure. Also, Amy's crack was back. Ruby is once again way too important. Russell T Davies has learned nothing. The first half felt more like a Queer as Folk episode. I so wanted to like this, desperately wanted to like this. I'll still watch a couple of the new series, fingers crossed it's better. And the old woman was Anita Dobbs, who played Angie Watts in the original cast of EastEnders. Has done a lot of work in the West End. Dude, fantastic video. But can you call him the Doctor, not Doctor Who? Ncuti and Millie carry an otherwise pretty good but not that special Moffat-esque timey-wimey adventure to a really enjoyable Christmas delight. I'd say it's slightly worse than the 360th anniversary specials. They were all A-tier episodes for me, but still in the same level, and it has me excited for the upcoming Series 14. Sorry Russell, but people are gonna be calling this Series 14. Blood is So Lonely on Christmas Part 2. He actually made a 20-minute review. Too real. My all-time favorite show turned into a rom-com after 9 left. Oh wow. Bro has been disliking the show since 2006. Maybe it's time to give it up, Sarge. 18 years. 18 years hating. The craziest part is that it was a rom-com with the 9th Doctor as well. Doctor Who stopped being good in 1989. Changed my mind. Big disappointment. First time I've really thought, damn, that was pretty bad since The Vanquisher. I'm still really excited for season 14 though. I think it has the chance to be amazing. While I did agree that The Vanquishers was pretty damn bad, Legends of the Sea Devils to me is one of the all-time greats in terms of how shit it is. That one is like bottom 5 of all time worthy. I thought it was rubbish. It felt very kiddie all round with multiple looks directly into the camera moments which just felt cringe. I think they were meant to be creepy. I thought Ruby's backstory was sappy and she just did very flat character, and that's just good girl with some bad luck. I was hoping for a lot more chemistry between her and the Gatwa. I thought the Doctor was just kind of there. He didn't leave any impact whatsoever, and I feel like we're supposed to just already know who he is, which I find a bit weird. I'm looking forward to learning more about him and makes him tick. Other than being a bit of a showman, I guess, I don't know. This area is not making me very excited, I'll say that much. I do like the running Mavity gag though. It's something classically quirky and I enjoy it. Edit, I forgot the song was embarrassing. It made me embarrassed to be a Doctor Who fan. I kind of feel that. I reckon it's going to be at least 10 more years until we get another good Doctor Who episode. 10 years? Damn bro, we got a long time to wait. Also, the black actor 100% got hired because Davis has a crush on him. And what's wrong with that? David Tennant got hired because Russell T Davies had a crush on him. Me personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In the words of Rachel Ziegler, that's showbiz, baby. Nah, but genuinely, Ncuti Gatwa is a really good actor. He got cast on his own skills. At least I think. Jesse XZ7BR says, love straights losing their minds over an increasingly gay Who. It's actually watchable now. Cringe. And here we are with the polls. These got quite a sizable number of responses, as you can see, and with 49% of people saying the episode was good. 22% said it was incredible, and 20% said it was alright, with surprising 9% saying it was bad, which leaves us to a 61 to 29% split, overall leaning towards good, meaning this episode was not liked quite as much as The Giggle or Wild Blue Yonder, but it is preferred over The Star Beast. And here's another one, just to prove that point. Which of these is the best Doctor Who 2023 special? With another 10,000 votes, the results came in with The Giggle, surprisingly clutching an 8% lead with 47% of the vote. That is quite surprising. Almost 50% of the responses said that The Giggle was the best episode, which I always thought Wild Blue Yonder was the fan favourite, but not so much. The Star Beast pulled in a sad 3%. Don't worry buddy, we'll get him next time. And Church on Ruby Road got 12. President Lemon says, did Russell just make a pro-life Doctor Who episode? Wasn't expecting that. Now you see, this is a funny comment because initially everyone's first reaction is, what the hell? But then you actually stop and think about it and you're like, now, of course, I don't actually think the episode is a pro-life episode because that's just ridiculous. And this guy's very clearly joking. But at the same time, if this was a Chibnall episode, everyone would be calling this a pro-life episode. And you guys know it. People still say the Doctor sent the Master to a concentration camp. That shit wasn't even implied. People just made it up and people believe it. Honestly, Gatwa is shaping up to be the next Pertwee. Wait, what? And that can only be a good thing. Well, if it was shaping up to be the next Pertwee, that could only be a good thing. I personally don't see any similarities. And that's okay. That's fine. He's just a Doctor in his own way. But I personally am gonna have to disagree with the assessment that he's the next John Pertwee. Just my opinion though. Captain Kirk says it was the best Doctor Who in a long time. People be saying that an awful lot. And that's the last comment of the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And I'm back. I've got lots planned for January and beyond, including hopefully a full edited retrospective of the whole 60th anniversary. So stay tuned for that. With all that being said, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Can you believe that 92% of people who watch don't subscribe? That's crazy. And if you want to help support the channel, you can click the join button below to gain access to an array of perks and benefits. Thank you to the members. And with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next one.